that means that we don't want to simply ordain men, say, go work hard for the next 40 years, 50 years, and we'll get back to you at the end. Mm-hmm. That's not going to be useful. We want to ordain men and then surround them with the support that they need to continue growing as persons, professionally, pastorally, personally, spiritually.
Welcome to Tulsa Time with Bishop Konderla. My name is Derek Lissy, and I am your host. Bishop David, how are you doing on this week of June 17th?
I'm well.
That's great.
June the 17th. Last week I was at the bishop's meeting. This summer we met in Louisville. The summer meeting moves around. The November meeting is always in Baltimore, and the summer meeting moves around. And this year we're in Louisville, Kentucky.
Nice.
So it's always as anyone will know who belongs to any kind of larger team, particularly if you're spread out, when you're able to get together and compare notes and catch up with each other and see how everyone's doing, it's always wonderful. And it's that way for us as bishops. Mm-hmm. To be able, we're each of us at work in our dioceses. Some have two or three working with them in the diocese.
Sure.
But typically you don't have another bishop close by. And so being able to get together is always good.
That's awesome. Well, this week we're preparing for the 12th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and we have a well-known gospel.
Yeah, this is another one of those that people will have seen lots of art for, maybe even have art in their house about, and that resonates with people just because of the storms of our lives. On that day, as evening drew on, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us cross to the other side," meaning the other side of the lake. Leaving the crowd, they took Jesus with them in the boat just as he was, and other boats were with him. A violent squall came up, and waves were breaking over the boat so that it was already filling up. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. They woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Quiet, be still." The wind ceased, and there was great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this whom even the wind and the sea obey?" Yeah, I love that. And it happens in a number of ways in the gospel where they've been with him, they're starting to get a bead on who he might be, they think they might know something about him, and then something like this happens and causes them to think, who is this? What have we gotten ourselves into here? What are we doing with this guy? And it would be terrifying. As terrifying as the wind and the sea were a couple of moments ago, to see the power that he wields would also be terrifying. That fear of the Lord is holy. Who is this guy? But, one of the things that I would say as a direction for the homiletic portion of this is we're not in the boat. When you're in the story, this is new to you and you're terrified. But we already seen the movie. We already know how the thing ends. And so there's a sense in which it's hard for us to resonate with this. But don't we act the same way when that phone call comes and says so-and-so has some emergency, someone we love? Or we go to the doctor and we get some dreaded news, or any of the kinds of things that go on in our lives that we would call rhetorically storms in our lives. And it doesn't even have to be major things. You know, someone might cut us off in traffic and suddenly thunder and lightning in the car. There's a storm. And when the storms erupt in our lives, if we would place our attention on him asleep in the boat, well, he's obviously not worried, and he's in the same boat I'm in. If I go down, he's going down. If we would do that, then we could ask the question and calm ourselves down. I wonder what he's going to do with this, because clearly this is not against me. Somehow it's not against me because he's in the boat with me, and here we are. And that question could change so much of what we have to deal with in our life. If instead of thinking, oh no, this has happened, it's the end, instead of thinking that, which is what they were doing, we would look at him and say, well, there he is. He's still with me. He still loves me. And yet this is happening. Mm-hmm. I wonder what he's going to do with it, because this is not good. So he must have some plan for it. What's he going to do with it? Now, a really important mistake not to make about this is to think, oh, that bad thing happened to me. God made that bad thing happen to me so that he could do this good thing with it. It doesn't work that way. God is not the kind of God who curses us with bad things so that he can bring good things out of them. Bad things do happen to us because we live in a fallen world and we live in a fallen state. And many of the bad things that happen to us because of our or other people's bad choices. But the point is, when something bad happens to us, even if it's because of our own fault, we can still look at him asleep in the boat and say, I wonder what he's going to do with this, because it can't be ultimately bad for us. Because
sometimes I think it's challenging when it is no one's fault.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's the most challenging time. Maybe,
yes.
Maybe that's a bit extreme on my end to say it's most. Maybe speaking to that, Bishop, because I think that sometimes it's an actual storm.
The question of evil, Peter Kreeft says this, that the question of evil is the only good argument against the existence of God. The question of why do bad things happen to good people is the only good argument against the existence of God. I worked for a year as a chaplain in the pediatric department at Scott and White Hospital. So I was on the PD oncology team, kids with cancer. I worked in the PD ICU, so very, very sick kids or badly injured kids, and on the PD floor, and there you ran into all kinds of kids. And definitely, when a little one, the innocent little one, has something terrible that happens to them, or even worse, that they die in some tragic way. That's the ultimate, right? I mean, I think most people would react to that's the ultimate, why did God let this happen? That's the ultimate storm. Mm-hmm. But I tell this story in the pastoral letter, the story about the grandmother whose 7-year-old boy was in the hospital and her 7-year-old grandson. And she was someone who who definitely was saying, look, God's in the boat with us. This is going to end well. But then it didn't. And in that moment, when by all human lights, she should have said, well, then God has abandoned us, or there is no God. What she said was, what's God going to do with this? That's in effect what she said. She began to look and see, what has God already done with this? We had this wonderful boy with us for 7 years. What great years those were. And what is God going to do with this, in the sense that this little boy is now going to be with God in heaven, and how wonderful that's going to be. So even then it's possible to look at Jesus asleep in the boat and say, he's with me. So what is he going to do with this?
Yeah, whenever I read this or, other versions of it, in the Gospels, just that question of him just turning to them and saying, why are you terrified?
Mm-hmm.
Just knowing the stillness of the moment, going from chaos to all of a sudden that question. And what do you say to that? That's a question that I read.
What I'd do, I'd be like, are you talking to me?
Did you just see what's going on?
Are you not paying? What are you, blind and deaf?
That's right. Exactly. That is what you would have said. What are you blind?
Hey, but you spoke about the way that college students reacted to this story.
Yes, absolutely.
As a focus missionary.
Yeah, working on campus. This was something that we oftentimes would do Ignatian meditation and Lectio Divina with, because in the question of why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith? Why? I think Jesus is asking every one of us. He's talking to every one of us when he asks that question.
Yeah.
And that is a big question that will either leave you saying, are you kidding? Look at my life. Or it will leave you saying, I don't know, but I have to figure that out.
Yeah.
And that was my experience.
Yeah.
And what are you seeking in this life? What do you want from this life? And what is it all about? I think that comes as kind of a follow-up to this.
Because the other question that hits you that way so personally is when he asks Peter, who do you say that I am? So he's asked, who do the people say that I am? That's easy to answer. That's all Facebook and social media, and that's what I see online.
Yeah.
Who do you say that I am means you have to decide what's my life for, because you're either going to say you're the Lord or you're not, and both of those have to do with what's my life about. And so similarly here, the thing to get here, though, this would be a type of fideism. If a person took from this that if only I had the right faith, I wouldn't be terrified. But when storms happen, they are real storms, and they do really happen, and they do cause real harm. Both the actual storms, as we've seen with tornadoes this summer, and just the metaphorical storms of our lives. And when those things happen, we are going to be terrified. So we're not robots, and we're not angels. We're human persons who have emotions. And so the point is not to not feel. The point is not to become a robot. The point is to be terrified and yet ask the question, I'm scared to death. I wonder what he's going to do with this. I'm terrified, but I can still pray. I'm terrified, but I can still go and help my neighbor. I'm terrified. I don't know what I'm even going to do tomorrow, but today I'm going to do X. So that's the point, is that when I decide in faith that Jesus is with me and Jesus loves me, then ultimately I know that I'm going to be cared for. So that gives me choices on how I'm going to respond to this storm that's going on around me right now, and how I'm not going to respond.
Yeah. One could say that this praying through the gospel, reading the gospel, and this is an opportunity for encounter with the Lord. And hopefully when we read the gospel, anytime when we hear it, when we pray through it, we are encountering the Lord, as we've talked about. How can that encounter with the Lord increase our faith? How can it improve our spiritual lives?
And you used a question last time, something along the lines of how can we prepare for the encounter? How can we till the ground for the encounter? Because we had the gospel on the scattering of the seeds, or the seeds that were planted, and the farmer watches them come up. And, again, I think we've said before, too, that everything is not a theophany. Most encounters with God are not a theophany. In the Old Testament, one can read about theophanies at Mount Zion with thunder and clouds, the loud voice and the blowing trumpets and the whole thing, and the people were terrified out of their skin. That's one kind of encounter, but most encounters are very simple. And so how can we prepare desiring to encounter the Lord? It begins there, desiring it, knowing that it's possible because God wants to encounter us, and desiring it. Look what will happen if I desire it versus if I don't desire it. I'll wake up in the morning and immediately I'll hit either iPad, iPhone, TV, radio, something. Does anyone use radio anymore? Something that will make noise.
I was listening to the radio the other day. Maybe a little classic rock or something. I can't remember.
I'll turn some kind of inputs on.
Yeah.
That precisely will probably block encounter. Now, sometimes it leads to encounter, depends on what I'm listening to.
Yeah.
But it's much more likely to distract me immediately.
Road less traveled for sure.
Now, on the other hand, because I desire encounter, I could wake up and say, I'm going to spend the first minutes of my day in silence, thanking God that I woke up, thanking God for my family and my friends, thanking God for my life and my job, thanking God that I even know that He exists. Mm-hmm. Anything, all of that. That's a way to prepare for encounter. Every day won't cause me, when I do that, to have some epiphany, but some days might, and that's enough. So that's what we mean. We talk about it a lot in the pastoral letter, the idea of encounter. And one of the pieces of the pastoral plan talks about places of encounter. And so each of us can carve out places and times and atmospheres where encounter could take place. You could plant your garden in your front yard without any preparation. Just take all the seeds that you were planning to plant in your garden and sprinkle them around in the front yard. Some of them literally might come up, and you might actually get some vegetables. But you have a much better chance of a successful garden if you go out into the yard and tear up that expensive sod and prepare the ground and then plant the seeds in properly tilled ground and weed the seedlings as they come up and protect them and water them and all that. Well, that's a good metaphor for our life with God. We can just live our life with no plan, no vision, no thought about, well, God is a priority of mine, and He might reach us. Or we could say, man, when I think of all that God has done for me, I want to be with Him. I want to know Him. I want to experience Him now. I don't want to wait till heaven. That's going to cause us to live in a bit different way. And that different way that we live will create spaces and times and atmospheres for encounter to possibly happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, going back to what we said in the pastoral letter against Pelagianism, doing that won't make God respond to us. That's not the kind of relationship we have with God. But doing that makes us more sensitive to the fact that He already is responding to us. Always He is responding to us. But we may be too distracted to notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so sort of our vision for the pastoral letter, as you've articulated for us, is Jesus gave us His life to save us and make us one. He invites us to encounter Him and choose Him as Lord. So sort of transitioning to the pastoral letter, what are the roles of the priorities and the core values within this sort of larger strategic plan that we have? Because we've got the letter, and we've talked a bit about the letter, but we also have sort of the plan, which start with core values and priorities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It always is an interesting process when we do pastoral planning, this kind of pastoral planning, because it starts wide and then it tries to narrow in. So it starts with choosing a team of people that represent constituencies throughout the diocese, and then gathering data, talking to people, survey data, discipleship maker index data, all kinds of data, pulling that in so that we have a strong sense of where are people in the Diocese of Tulsa, where are people right now in this moment? What are they experiencing as helps to their faith? What are they experiencing as hopes for their faith? Where are the challenges? And then to try to think, boiling those things down, to try to think through, what are things that we can do in the next 3 to 5 years? So that's an important piece of a pastoral plan, is that it's very tightly focused. It's focused in a small period of time and a small few things that we can focus on. Because everything, we can't say, well, let's do everything. Well, we're doing everything, right? In other words, we've got parishes, we've got sacraments, we've got preaching, we've got catechesis and teaching in schools and hospitals. We've got all the stuff going on. Mm-hmm. But are there areas that we can give particular focus for a period of time in order to make a specific kind of impact, all based on the kind of data that we were gathering? And so that's what we've done here. It focuses with that operating vision, the plan vision. Jesus gave his life to save us and make us one. That's basically saying to us that everything begins with God. It's always his initiative first. We're always in the mode of response. And why would we want to respond? Well, there's the reason. Jesus gave us his life. God has given his life to us. And he did that to prove to us that he loves us, to prove to us that we can trust him. And the more that we come into contact with that, the more that we internalize that gift, the more that we personalize it even, the more that we will want to respond because of how much we love him. So God, having done that for us, invites us to encounter him so we can live our life without encountering God. We can just go about our life blindly, day to day, being driven by the winds, or we can say, I want to see him.
Right.
What can I do to style my life in such a way that I have a better opportunity of seeing him? He invites us to encounter him and then to choose. And choose what? Choose him as an important figure in my life? Choose him as a great teacher? No, he wasn't those things. He either is Lord and God, Jesus either is the Savior, or he is, as Peter Kreeft talks about, he's a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. If he's not Lord, he said he was. So if he's not Lord, he's a liar. If he's not the Lord, he said he was. So maybe he's just crazy. Maybe he actually thought he was, but he's really not. Both were things that people thought at the time.
Right.
We choose him as Lord, but the operative thing there is choose, because we don't have to. We can just say, Jesus did a nice thing a long time ago. I hope it helps a lot of people. I even hope it helps me somehow. But I'm going to live my life on my own terms.
I love that detachment, that level of detachment. I hope it helps me somehow. It's totally detached.
There are people that believe that.
I know,
right?
I know. But
let me say it this way. Sometimes people's lives, through no fault of their own, can be so chaotic, so filled with chaos, family-related, relationship-related. Maybe they were a victim of some horrible crime. Maybe they've just had tremendous losses and no one around them to help them deal with those losses, etc. So people's lives can be so chaotic that their sense of, gosh, I hope that helps somebody. It seems like a good thing, but it doesn't seem to have any bearing on me. That can be real for them.
Yeah.
God doesn't look at someone like that and say, how dare you?
Right.
Right? God knows exactly what's in their life and in their heart. What God wants is to meet them. And he needs someone like us to help break through whatever the trauma is and to say, I know that it's been so hard, but let me tell you about someone. Let me just tell you about someone. So we have to choose him as Lord. This is just going to, I hope people will get sick of me saying it. I hope I'll say it so often that people get sick of hearing it. But it's not to be a Christian, to be a disciple of Jesus Christ is not passive. It's not a passive life. It requires a decision firmly made and repeated every day.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it have to be repeated every day? I married my wife. We said I do one time, a long time ago, in front of a lot of people, and we only did it that one time. No, that is not true. You've done it every single day since then, or your marriage
in rough shape.
Is in rough shape. You've done it not in front of a lot of people, and you haven't gotten dressed up again, but you've done it by the way that you live. You've done it by the intentions of your mind and your heart. And the same with being a disciple of Jesus. I can't say, Jesus, at a youth retreat when I was 18, wow, this is so awesome. Jesus, I want to be your disciple. And that's it. Because later when I'm 28, some storm may arise in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that storm requires a new decision. I got married and now I've got 3 babies. Those babies require new decisions and so forth.
Yeah.
So it works more like that.
And Bishop, you use the marriage analogy often when we talk about our relationship with the Lord. But oftentimes in marriage, and with kids, it's very obvious, here's a moment where I need to say, I do, right? Let's say it like it is, somebody needs their diaper changed, somebody needs this, a child needs help with their homework,
Mm-hmm.
the taking out the trash, the chores, the managing of the family home. It's like, here's the opportunity to say I do. But I think for a lot of people, it's very hard to say I do to Jesus over and over again because, quite frankly, their lives are chaotic and things like that. So how does one say I do? Does it go back to posture and setting yourself up for that, or how would you answer that?
I would say that it must be done in small, ordinary ways first. So I do doesn't mean that I'm going to go volunteer for leading the
Catholic Charities,
whatever the big thing is at church.
Yeah.
I do maybe just exactly what you said. I do is, man, I've worked 10 hours today and I don't feel like going through that front door and those kids are going to be all over me. But I do. And I go in. Now, going through a front door seems like a very small thing, but on a given day, it may not be. It may take a great effort. I do may look like I'm being invited out with a bunch of my friends to do, I know where this is going to lead, and I really want to go with them, but I know where this is going to lead, and so I'm not going to go. That's an I do. This person needs my help, and I really don't want to go over there, but they need my help. I do. So it's going to be small things like that. It can even be small, simple prayer. So, when we spoke about getting up in the morning, I make an immediate decision. Do I surround myself with noise, or do I take a few moments to be quiet now that I'm awake? That's an I do moment. I do. And those things then form a lifestyle. The lifestyle forms or helps inform the decision. They feed each other. The decision leads to choices. The choices lead to the firm decision.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So priestly flourishing and support is your first priority within this plan.
Yeah. Now,
what is that all about?
Yeah, not in the sense. So one thing about a pastoral plan is then it's all written out. It's not that the pastoral planning team was not trying to say that priestly flourishing and support is the most important thing in the plan. That's why it's number one. It's just there's 3 of them, and we put that one up there as the first one. And so that's a recognition that comes from the Discipleship Maker Index of the Catholic Leadership Institute. And Catholic Leadership Institute is an organization that helps dioceses all over the country do many different kinds of things, including helping put together pastoral plans. But one of the tools that they've developed that's so cool, and we've taken it throughout the diocese here, is what's called the Discipleship Maker Index. And it's a tool that helps to quantify what are the things that help the life of faith and what are the things that get in its way. Mm-hmm. And one of the results of the DMI demonstrates that it's profoundly important, the health, spiritual, emotional, psychological, physical health of the pastor on the lives of the people in the parish. The healthier, happier, more wholesome the pastor is, the more successful the parish will be. And that's demonstrated in various ways.
Makes sense.
And so, yeah, it does make sense. And so that means that we don't want to simply ordain men, say, go work hard for the next 40 years, 50 years, and we'll get back to you at the end. Mm-hmm. That's not going to be useful. We want to ordain men and then surround them with the support that they need to continue growing as persons, professionally, pastorally, personally, spiritually. And so first there's a recognition that that kind of growth does have to happen. Seminary is 5 to 8 years, or even 9 years. And you learn a lot. You learn so much in that period of time so that you can begin life as a priest. But boy, life as a priest, there's a lot in there. And so much of the questions you won't know until you've gotten into it. The same with parenting. I'm sure you knew a few things about babies before you had one, but they were broad general ideas. And when you had them, then you really said, oh my goodness, I didn't know this. Who can I ask? And you were learning on the job, but the issue is that, okay, 10 months in, I got this baby thing down, man. I know how to change those diapers. I'm on it.
Stop.
But then he turns 1. You never had a 1-year-old before, and the 1-year-old has a baby right behind him. So it continues like that. Well, the same for the priest. I was never ordained before, so I learned about how to do confessions and preach and how to have pastoral counseling with people. And I had a general sense that there might be some moments in meetings that were tense. And I never imagined that people might send me a nasty email and tell me, Father, I don't like you at all, blah, blah, blah. But all those things happen in the life of a priest. So he needs to continue to grow, and he needs to continue to have tools to grow. He might not have had time in seminary, depends on how he was when he started, to learn Spanish as another example. Well, most of our parish assignments these days will benefit if the priest understands and is competent to speak Spanish and culturally competent to do ministry among Spanish-speaking people. So that's another example of flourishing and support that a priest needs. We have a sabbatical program. Amazingly, it can be hard to talk priests into taking the time, 10 years in, to take a sabbatical. Try to take some time off. We want you to have 3 to 6 months off to go through a particular kind of renewal program or something so that you can strengthen yourself, for the ongoing ministry. So that's an important one because we recognized that's something that we can do that will have an immediate impact on the parishes, on the people of God, and the health and life of the parishes.
Yeah, your second priority there is the vocation and mission of the laity. And so what roles do the laity have in continuing this mission?
Yeah, and that's so important. The Vatican Council focused so much on the life of the laity and the importance of the laity. if I meet 5,000 people in a week, because I've celebrated masses here and there and the other place.
Or just at St. Thomas More.
Oh, yeah, or just at St. Thomas. That's 5,000 people that I've met. But each of those 5,000 people will meet 5,000 people in the week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they only meet 500, even if they only meet 50. What they can do is way more than what I can do in the course of a week. If they understand themselves to be disciples of Jesus Christ who have been commissioned by the Lord by virtue of their baptism to spread his good news, to be missionaries for him in the world. If they don't know that, if their thought of, quote, lay ministry, if their thinking of lay ministry is, well, I don't really have time on Sunday to be a lector. It's got very little to do with that. Lay ministry has very little to do with being a lector or being an altar server or an usher or any of those things. Those are all important things. One of the ways that we described it in the pastoral plan is that we want to create disciples, not volunteers. Disciples volunteer. So that's a rhetorical way of saying, if I create a whole bunch of ushers, let's say I've got a really good ushers club, but they sit around and drink at the casino or something. None of them do that. 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 But if that were the case, well, then I haven't done anything.
Got a foot cramp or something?
Yes. Ow. Ow. Okay. We just had our first medical emergency on the podcast.
Okay. That's why you got to drink water during the podcast.
Yeah, I had a cramp in my, what's that big muscle that runs up your back of your thigh?
Your hamstring?
Yeah, the hamstring. Ouch.
That'll happen.
Okay, so that's not going to happen. But if that did happen, then I haven't done anything by making a bunch of volunteers.
Yeah.
But if I have created in the parish disciples who understand themselves to be disciples, and they see that one of the needs that we have in the parish are people who can host and serve the community when it gathers for things like the Mass. And hosting and serving means greeting people. It means helping take up a collection. It means watching the doors and helping people out, whatever they need. Well, those disciples are going to volunteer for those roles simply because they're disciples. So disciples volunteer. So that was the point of that, the vocation and mission of the laity. The other amazing point of it, such a primary point, is, and we spoke about this before, for families to take themselves seriously as a unit, as a family, that they're not an accidental grouping. We got married and suddenly we had all these children, and so here we are raising them. No, God has intended that group to be and is going to be wanting to use that group as a group. So families to take themselves seriously. So parents to understand themselves as the primary educators in the faith of their children. Not that parents are going to be the ones ordering the curriculum necessarily and sitting down with the kids and helping them with their exercises. They may do all of that, but primarily by sharing their faith with them, telling the kids why they themselves love Jesus. Yeah, that's a primary piece of that.
That's beautiful. And then finally, you had the third priority as a vicariates of as community of faith. Yeah. So maybe you could speak into that. And I know we've talked before about how we can shrink the diocese. We don't want to literally shrink it, but we want to
shrink wrap it.
That's right. But maybe you could speak into that.
Well, many people won't be familiar with what the word even is, vicariate. A vicariate, it's sometimes also called a deanery. Mm-hmm. My old diocese, we used the term deanery. But both of them are canonical terms that describe an area of a diocese that is overseen by a vicar, that is to say an assistant to the bishop, for particular kinds of administrative and pastoral needs and roles. So the Diocese of Tulsa is broken up into these 6 vicariates. So that allows the whole big Diocese of Tulsa to be broken up into smaller chunks that are administratively easier to deal with in the whole thing. And so one simple way for people to see this is to think in terms of our annual Faith Formation Conference. So every year the diocese puts on an annual Faith Formation Conference in August, which I recommend everyone to go to. And we'll get 800 or more people that come to that Saturday-long event from all parts of the diocese. That's put on as a diocese for the whole diocese. But that's hard to put on. It takes a lot of work to put that together, and it's not something you could do very often because of how much it takes to do.
Yeah.
But if in the different 6 vicariates, you had gatherings for the priests, which they already do several times a year, the priests of the vicariate gather together to talk about common issues. But if you also had gatherings of deacons in that vicariate, if you had gatherings of DREs, gatherings of parish administrators, gatherings of moms raising 5-year-olds, it could be anything. And they could meet anywhere in the vicariate. It's a smaller place so that it only takes, for instance, in the southern one, which is our biggest one, if you plan things that are in some of the parishes towards the center of it, no one's going to have to drive more than an hour, hour and a half to get to something. Whereas to come all the way to Tulsa, they're going to drive 3 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we mean by shrinking the diocese. It allows the parishes and people in the parishes to interact with the parish family, the diocesan big family, but also in between those two, the vicariate family, a smaller grouping of people with whom all of us in this particular geographical area are trying to win people for Christ.
Mm-hmm. There's a number of discussion questions that are great on the pastoral letter that are fantastic to use for study as we talk about the pastoral letter.
And with families, I mean, you could...
Yeah, how would you like families to use this, communities? What is your vision for, at the simple level, surface level, how do I take this booklet? How do I use this document well? Do I use it as a family?
Now look, so I'm just thinking of Jojo.
Oh, my son.
Your son, Jojo. Jojo may not be ready to talk very much about. So one of the study questions says, what might be some problems in the spiritual life if we do not renew our decision to follow Jesus every day? Well, Joseph may not be ready to speak very much about that.
Sure.
But Joseph's dad could think of a way to ask that question with Joseph and even the other kids in a way that he would have something to say to it. And so those study questions can be used by groups of families. Let's say you had a gathering of 5 families at somebody's house on a Saturday afternoon, and you got the kids all hot dogs and whatever running around in the yard, and the parents took 30 minutes to sit around and have a conversation about these questions. That would be a very interrupted 30 minutes with kids coming every 2 minutes about somebody did something to somebody and I spilled this and I broke that. But in the midst of all that, there could be 5 minutes of good conversation.
That's right.
Among the parents. I was at the...
I just appreciate that you have a perfect picture of what family life is. There's never any, you never miss it. You're never here. You never hear it. It's always right down in there. This is exactly
I did a mass for a group of families that was camping at Sequoia State Park a couple of weeks ago. And I noticed that there were several kids running around chewing on buzzard feathers that they had found on the ground. And
turns out you don't want to chew on those.
I thought, they're going to be immune to everything. Those kids will be, if they survive it, they're going to be immune to everything.
And they'll probably be just fine.
But yeah, so that's one way.
Okay.
Families to read this together, families to read it with their kids, but to explain it, again, for parents, it would give parents another opportunity to explain to their kids, what do we think about our priest and how can we help him? What do we think about ourselves as disciples? What does it mean to you? I'm talking to my 3-year-old. What does it mean to you to love Jesus. You're gonna simplify it so that they can understand it. You're gonna get them some colors and say, what would love for Jesus look like? What color is it? And they'll respond. They'll do things.
Beautiful. That's great, Bishop. Thank you all for joining us. This has been Tulsa Time with Bishop Konderla. We hope you have a blessed rest of your week.